Hey guys, Ashley here. I'm really excited to share this series of weaving videos where you can follow along with me to create this weaving, and we'll go technique by technique and I'll show you how to do them, or you can use the videos individually to create your own weaving. So before we get started weaving, I'm gonna show you all the materials and supplies that you're gonna need. So the first thing is the loom, and then we're gonna have a pickup stick, a stick shuttle, and a weaving needle. And then we've got a little yarn needle, a scissor, our yarn, we're gonna use some roving, and then a cotton yarn. This is for the warp. And then a chopstick, a 1/2-inch strip of cardboard, or this is chipboard. And then I've got another piece of chipboard that is just, the idea is I want it for the length of this. And then it's also a good idea before you get started when you're weaving on your own is to kind of sketch out your idea so you have a plan. So I've kind of created the drawing and wrote out what I'm going to do. Before we can start weaving, we need to warp the loom. And the warp is the yarns that go vertical, and your weft yarn is the yarns that go horizontal. So the vertical yarns are your warp yarns, and that's when you use the cotton warp yarn. It's the foundation of your weaving. The weft yarns are horizontal. That is the decoration of your weaving. So then to get started, you take your cotton warp yarn and you just tie a loop. Because we're not going to make a weaving that is the whole width of the loom, you always want to center the weaving onto the loom. So we're just going to start in a few inches. So you take that loop and you just wrap it around one of the teeth. And then I find it's helpful to unwind the warp. I actually put my warp yarn on the floor. So I just let it roam free and do whatever it needs to do, so that I can just concentrate on putting the warp yarn onto the loom. And so even though I've got the warp yarn started on this one, we're gonna be putting a yarn in between each tooth, and so we act as if this warp yarn is coming from this side of the tooth. So then when you bring it back up, you're putting it next to it so that there's a yarn in the between each tooth. So it's like wrapping around every other tooth. And I also typically will hold on to my warp yarn to help create as even a tension as possible, because you want your warp yarns to be taut but not too tight. You don't necessarily want them too tight, or it just gets hard to get in between each yarn. But you don't want them too loose, because then they can sag and it's possible to skip or miss a warp yarn in the weaving process. So now we are going to finish by making another loop. And you just slip that over the tooth. Okay, I also wanted to mention a quick note, the little 1/2-inch wide cardboard piece. So everyone has their preference of weaving, and some people weave right side up, some people weave upside down. My preference is to weave upside down, which is why in my picture you can kind of see the different weaving with the fringes up here, where when I'm holding it up you see the fringe down here. And so I like to weave upside down because then I have one side that is completely finished. I don't have to be cutting and tying, but then I need to hold a space for my hanging dowel. So I insert this little piece of cardboard to make sure I've got the amount of space held, so that when I take it off the loom, I can just slip the cardboard out and then stick the dowel in.